Welcome to this special edition of the New Stack Makers on the Road. We're here at HashiConf Global in beautiful Los Angeles, California. Discussions with technologists giving you their expertise and insights to help you with your everyday work. Infrastructure enables innovation. HashiCorp provides consistent workflows to provision, secure, connect, and run any infrastructure for any application.
Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of the New Stack Makers podcast and videocast. This week, we're back on the road. This is part of our On the Road series, and we're at HashiConf. This is the annual user conference for infrastructure software management provider HashiCorp. And we're here to learn about the latest products and services that they're offering, and they have a compelling story around single sign-on, zero trust networks and how to put that into motion. Our guest today is Megan Laflamme, and she is a HashiCorp Director of Product Marketing. Thank you for taking time to talk with us.
Thank you for having me.
So our readers have probably heard about Zero Trust. We've certainly run enough stories on it this year, but they might be wondering, well, how do I, with my existing resources, how do I implement Zero Trust? And HashiCorp has a whole stack of software, but also managed offerings that will help do this. And that's what we want to do, is we want to delve into how this can be done with some of the new products that were introduced this week. First of all, what is HashiCorp's definition of zero trust?
At HashiCorp, we believe that zero trust security is predicated on identity. This is the idea that you trust nothing and you authenticate and authorize everything. From applications, network services, and people, everything must be authenticated, authorized by identity.
Excellent, but current networks do that now. I know I sign on and, I go to a database and I have to sign on to the database. How is this different?
I think it's helpful to think about the traditional approaches to access. So historically, where there was traditionally the four walls of a data center, we call this a castle and moat approach, where everything outside is bad and everything inside is good. And there's typically one point of entrance and exit into that data center. Mm-hmm. Whether it's through a VPN or firewall. And now in the cloud operating model, that perimeter is no longer static, and you move to a much more dynamic infrastructure environment. And so now it's critical to identify either databases like applications and machines based on their logical identity, to apply the same concept of identity to people based on their role and what they can access within that network, and lock down services that they cannot access. And the same thing with network services like load balancers and such, so that you can ensure this web server can talk to this API.
From what I understand, this will become a lot harder as organizations inevitably start to use multiple clouds.
Exactly. And we just announced at HashiConf a new solution for secure remote access that rounds out our zero trust security solutions. So as I mentioned, at the foundation of all of this is identity.
Yeah.
So Vault has traditionally been a machine-to-machine authentication and authorization solution. Mm-hmm. As you expand into multiple data centers and multiple clouds, Vault becomes that global identity broker across all of your environments. Mm-hmm. And then sitting on top of that platform, you can use Vault to identify your machines, promote authentication and authorization across them. Uh-huh. And then we have Console on the HashiCorp Cloud Platform as well. That solution focuses on that network challenge of which database can talk to which web server, for example. So it focuses on that network solution. And then as of this week, we have just launched Boundary on the HashiCorp cloud platform, which addresses secure remote access for users. And our focus here is really on streamlining the developer workflow for access to critical infrastructure.
I was about to say, if I have to log into every one of the applications I use on a daily basis, that would be a giant headache. But I guess I don't do this with now. How is Boundary different from just opening up a secure connection through OpenSSH?
Yeah, so it's helpful to think about some of the traditional challenges in access workflows today. So if I'm thinking about a technical persona like a developer or a production support analyst,
Right.
typically there's multiple systems of controls for access in the organization today. That could be an SSH bastion host or a jump host, firewall controls, and privilege access management solutions. And the challenge with those traditional access solutions today is they're typically, if you take a VPN, for example, when somebody logs into the network, they typically have access to everything through that VPN. Firewalls, for example, typically IP network location address, which really falls apart in the cloud operating model where you have dynamic ephemeral resources. And then privilege access management solutions today are typically very UI driven and manual. And all of these things slow developer productivity. You've got ticketing systems in place. Sometimes it takes days to weeks to get access to that critical infrastructure. So with Boundary on the HashiCorp cloud platform, what we've done is really streamlined that access workflow and enabled a much more improved security posture. And there's a few ways that we do that. So focusing on that developer workflow, it starts with authentication and authorization. So we integrate with leading identity providers via OIDC, such as Azure AD, Okta, Ping, for example. Okay. And that is the foundation of that human identity. So you're leveraging your trusted identities within the organization. So a developer can just SSO into Boundary. And then Boundary becomes that very smart identity-aware proxy that becomes a proxy for access to that back-end infrastructure.
So I don't have to, if I go to a database, I don't have to type in my credentials.
Exactly. And so with Boundary, we enable a much more streamlined workflow for permitting access to critical infrastructure, where we have integrations with cloud providers or service registries, and that automates ultimately the targets under management so that when somebody logs into Boundary at runtime, they have availability to the targets that they're authorized to have access to, and that is updated automatically within Boundary. So they just log in and they ultimately see this database that they can connect to or this web server that they're authorized to connect to.
And you could do that through the command line or...
Yeah, we offer Boundary is available. We have a desktop client, Windows, as well as Mac support and command line as well.
And behind the scenes, it's console feeding the authentication information.
So on the back end, that's actually a great question. One of the value propositions of Boundary is that now you're not only not exposing the network any longer to the end user, you're also not exposing credentials. And we do that through an integration with Vault. So when somebody goes to connect to that target, let's say it's a database, Boundary will talk to Vault, and Vault will mint a one-time credential, inject that into the session, and so the user is never exposed to those database credentials.
Nice. So they're not floating out there on the network.
Exactly.
And so just to make sure I get this correct, as a developer, I sign on once. When I sign on in all the normal apps I go through, I don't have to sign on any longer. It's just single sign on.
Yes, through Boundary as that proxy.
Wow, that would be nice.
Yes.
You hear that, Alex? We should use that in-house. So you could cobble all this together internally for your own organization, or I guess you could use the HashiCorp
Cloud platform. Exactly.
All right. So how do I do that? I got a whole bunch of resources. I got this, which is a service, a managed service. How does that work? How do I put that together?
HashiCorp has really pioneered zero trust security in the cloud. So now with the HashiCorp Cloud platform, we have managed offerings of Vault, Console, and Boundary. So it's much easier to get up and running on these zero trust security solutions. And a developer, for example, could just go to the HashiCorp portal, try Boundary for free, and could ultimately set up access for themselves to their critical resources in under 15 minutes.
Wait, so before I get to the organizational level, as a developer, I could try it just for my own.
Exactly.
All stuff I sign into.
Exactly. So that could prevent somebody who's VPNing into, 5 VMs a day. They can set up their own targets within Boundary to streamline access for themselves. HCP Boundary also has several capabilities that address some of the more sophisticated access needs for an organization.
Okay.
As I mentioned, being able to connect to cloud providers such as AWS and Azure, that ensures that regardless of where infrastructure resides, your development workforce or anyone who needs back-end infrastructure access has that access to resources regardless of where it lives. And as I mentioned with that integration with Vault, the ability to leverage dynamic secrets, so you have just-in-time credentials, ensures that no one has access to credentials, which are often today stored in static locations, maybe in GitHub. You might see it in Confluence or shared across Slack. So that really improves security posture while improving developer productivity.
And well, that also, I guess that would work for the CI/CD process as well.
Yes.
In addition to working for, I guess, any sort of app.
Exactly. Yeah. So today, Boundary supports TCP protocols as well as SSH, and then anything running over TCP, such as RDP, SSH, database, and the likes as well.
Terrific. Is this also a good approach for, I guess, standardizing across different clouds? Is this the way to abstract clouds?
Exactly.
Okay.
So this is one single workflow, regardless of where that infrastructure resides. So you're really abstracting away a lot of the different workflows to get into infrastructure, whether it's on-prem or on AWS or on Azure. This is one workflow that is consistent and standardized for people who need access to that back-end infrastructure.
Is there anything else about Boundary or about the whole Zero Trust stack that you think our listeners and viewers might be interested in?
Absolutely. So if they try HashiCorp Boundary today, you can access that for free, as well as HCP Vault and HCP Console. So I encourage anyone to just try it out, and we look forward to hearing from them.
All right. Well, Megan, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us and get us up to speed on Zero Trust.
Absolutely.
And thank you, listeners and viewers, for tuning in, and we'll see you at the next episode of the New Stack Makers, the On the Road series.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.